Hey, what's up, Oakhurst STEAM Academy? It's Mr. P, and for today's readathon, I thought it would be a really cool idea to read the prologue and the first chapter in my book, The Apple from Outer Space. I wrote this book a couple years ago, and it took me a couple years to get it revised and published and find an artist to do the cover and a couple pieces of artwork on the inside as well. But I'm very, very proud of this book. And it's a book of perseverance, making it through hard times. It's a book of friendship. It's a book of forgiveness and hope. And one of my favorite characters in this book is this little green globby dude right here named Gloppy. Gloppy, just like the apple, and a couple of the other characters are based off of real people and things in my life. So even though the main character is an apple, I am the main character. A lot of the apple struggles and things that he goes through in his life are similar to things that I go through. And that's what a good author does. A good author brings in their own personal experiences and brings them into stories to share with others. And the little green guy, who's my favorite, is based on my dog, Campbell. Because he's kind of sweet and he's kind of nice, but he's also a little goofy and sometimes annoying. But, I wanted to share The Apple from Outer Space with you, and if you like what I am reading today and you're interested, you could get this book on Amazon or just come talk to me. I know Mr. Floyd has a couple copies on sale, or not on sale, but up for checking out in the library as well. So join me in reading The Apple from Outer Space. All right, here we go. Once upon a time, there was an apple. Although red in color and delicious in taste, this apple was unlike any other apple. This apple could not be bought in a grocery store, nor picked from a tree. In fact, the apple I am speaking to you about isn't even from this planet. This was the apple from outer space. For many, many years, the apple from outer space only existed in the childish tales and made-up stories overheard on school playgrounds. The tales were full of action, drama, and yes, sometimes even romance. To children around the globe, the apple from outer space was not just another ordinary hero. He was the least ordinary of all the heroes. You see, the apple from outer space wasn't merely an imagined persona of power and prowess. He was as real as the smell of hot dogs at a Saturday afternoon baseball game. At some recent point in history, the legend of the apple from outer space began to spread from school playgrounds into everyday life. Trendy teenagers started dyeing their hair red, while a slew of hipster grandmas dug out their crusty pie pans and began religiously baking delicious apple pies. On both the eastern and western coasts, suburban families changed and rearranged their landscaping to plant apple trees because it was the cool thing to do. In small towns throughout the Midwest, police officers and firefighters wore red apple-shaped pins in honor of the apple from outer space. Even the big city dwellers were getting in on all of the apple action. There were red taxi cabs, candy apple street vendors, and even a Broadway musical about the apple from outer space's escapades. Before long, national TV journalists began reporting on the apple from outer space's adventures and celebrating its victories over evil. The most popular pop stars of the time were releasing #1 albums dedicated to the mysterious yet heroic apple from outer space. Singles such as "You're the Apple of My Eye," "Falling Not Too Far from the Tree," and "Keeping the Doctor Away" were blasting on all of the planet's airwaves. Even the contemporary art world was turned on its head when artists refused to use any color other than red. When leaves sprinkled the ground and temperatures dropped, communities around the globe put everything they had into their local apple festivals. Kids of all ages dunked their heads into large wooden barrels brimming with floating apples. And fanciful chalices full of warm apple cider clinked and cheered as abnormal amounts of chortling pranced through the chilly autumn air. Family friends and friendly families gathered around warm fires and shared suspenseful snippets of the apple from outer space's most dangerous adventures. And when it was time for All Hallows Eve, spherical red costumes flooded the streets, skipping door to door, pleading for red delicious apples rather than the usual sugary treats. In a very short period of time, the apple from outer space had become an interstellar celebrity. The story you are about to read is the only existing true account of the apple from outer space. Warning! This adventure is not for the weak-minded nor the empty-stomached, but instead for all of the weird, silly, and sort of awkward beings out there roaming the universe wondering if anyone will truly understand them. So sit back, relax, and wait, no, don't do that. Please don't do that. No, instead do the opposite. Sit up, pay attention, and immerse yourself in The Apple from Outer Space! Chapter 1. Same flarp, different day. Vroom, blurp, splutter, splurp. Somewhere in the outer regions of the Milky Street galaxy was a rusted-up, jigsawed-together spaceship. This very sad and utterly shameful transportation device bounced and hiccuped its way through the sparkly darkness of space. Sticking out like a sore nose and appearing even slummier than a floating dumpster, this particular ship looked like a grungy, crushed-up can of cola. Spray-painted a lovely poo brown and discharging ear-splitting dad groans and grandpa farts, the unusually shaped ship had seen better days. Way better days. It was a mini miracle that this terrible flying contraption, continually hanging on the edge of worthlessness and, if it got us through it before, it'll get us through it again mentality, could even move in a forward motion, let alone provide safe passage for any willing passenger. The main cabin of the spaceship resembled the insides of the street corner trash can. It was disgusting, like seeing the girl you had a crush on pick her nose and then eat it disgusting. The dull, used to be silver interior walls were haphazardly riveted together, leaving crannies just big enough for some super gross greenish-brown space goo to seep inside. Sprinkled all over the steel walls were crudely drawn stick figures, unsolvable math equations, and plain old gibberish. Maps and drawings of maps fluttered through the air, while remnants of past nibbling slid across the floor. The ship's cabin wasn't somewhere you wanted to be, or in any case needed to be. There was nothing useful there anymore. It was a dark hole of broken artifacts, forgotten memories, and dead space rats. Gerp! Gerp, gerp, gerp. Psst, pff. The pitiful small brown ship jolted forward and stopped, dead in what felt like the middle of the night, somewhere in the middle of outer space. Floating freely in the darkness, the worthless ship sat isolated and alone, in an unnerving, almost overwhelming, never-ending stillness. Poosh! Rup-rup-up! Rup-rup-up-up! Oh, Crinkleschmitz! Shrieked the apple from outer space from the cockpit of his not-working-so-great ship. Not again! His white-gloved hand crept over toward the squarish yellow screen and smacked it ever so slightly. Come on, dude, come back to me! In the frontmost part of the ship was a measly little cockpit, the control center for this flying piece of space garbage. The cockpit, located adjacent to the ship's cabin, was where the apple from outer space spent the majority of his time. At the head of the cockpit was a fairly large, immensely wrecked windshield, and directly underneath the windshield was an old-school-looking control panel. This particular super retro control panel was well-equipped with rows upon rows of glowy square buttons. When pressed, the neon and bright red buttons could do super cool things, like turn on the ship's defense systems or order a pizza from a distant planet. There was even a button that could open the ship's lower hatch and eject an annoying passenger out into the atmosphere. The apple from outer space's ship had dozens of these buttons. The only problem was, barely any of them worked. Underneath the middle of the basically useless control panel, sticking out slightly to the left of center, was an unusually designed steering mechanism. Constructed rather inexpensively from leftover griggle-grogs and half-dingled crinklets, the ship's steering mechanism resembled a metallic banana, twisted together with clothes hangers. One of the reasons the apple from outer space was such a great pilot was because of this riveted-together steering mechanism. Even though it looked like an abstract sculpture of useless parts and metals, inside of it was a state-of-the-art guidance system with impulse-sensitive maneuvering mechanics. It was both intuitive and had an insanely quick response time. In fact, Using it the way the Apple did allowed him to avoid many life-threatening encounters with large, unnatural land formations, floating bits of space garbage, and the gnarliest of the gnarls, giant squid pirates. Even though the ship appeared to be nothing more than a useless chunk of junk, it was what was inside that mattered most. To the left of the control panel, bolted securely into the steel wall, was the ship's onboard computer monitor. The outdated monitor operated on a two-color screen, sort of bright and a little bit brighter than that. The monitor was hooked directly into the ship's intelligence system, and for many, many years, it offered useful advice and gave accurate directions. Recently, the monitor was growing tired and was in such bad shape that every time an asteroid or some random piece of space junk made contact with the ship, the screen would flicker and short out, causing the entire vessel to shut down. This time was no different. The monitor was once again offline and unresponsive. While covered in darkness, the train wreck of a ship eerily floated through the vastness of space. It was no more than a disfigured brown lump waiting to be scooped up and flushed down life's toilet. Similar to that turd your brother left floating in the bathtub when you were 4. It was the same flarp, different day. Well, thanks so much, Oakhurst, for listening to me read the prologue and the first chapter of my book, The Apple from Outer Space. If you liked what you heard, feel free to talk to me, check a book out with Mr. Floyd, or go on Amazon and buy your very own copy. I'd be happy to sign it for you, too, if you bring it into school.